During an open house in Oklahoma, a realtor mocked a painting of the Virgin Mary on a garden wall. He didn't know it, but that painting was going to change his life forever. A miracle of the Virgin Mary that no one can explain. But before we continue, leave a comment saying where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. You know that type of person who has an answer for everything, who never needed to ask anyone for help? Derek was 45 years old and had been selling houses in Oklahoma for almost 20 years. He had the gift of persuasion. He was one of those people who opened his mouth and people simply believed. He didn't need to insist, didn't need to push. The right words came out at the right time, in the right tone. And the client signed. And most of the time it was true. Derek was good at what he did. Very good. His colleagues said Derek could sell ice to an Eskimo. And he didn't disagree. You know those people who seem to have their entire life organized in a spreadsheet? Derek was like that. His whole week planned out. The open houses were rehearsed performances. He'd arrive at least an hour early, check the rooms, put coffee on to brew because the smell of coffee makes people feel at home. Fresh flowers on the table because flowers convey life. Nothing was by chance. Everything had a calculation behind it. And it worked. The commissions were high. The bank account was comfortable. The apartment was nice. Life was good. There was just one thing Derek didn't have space for in his life: faith. It wasn't a matter of anger. He didn't hate religion. He didn't argue with anyone about it. If a client mentioned God, he'd smile and change the subject. Derek simply thought faith was a waste of time. Derek received a call from a family who wanted to sell their mother's house. The lady had passed away recently at 84 years old. She'd lived there her whole life. The family needed to handle the estate. Derek went to the house that same day. When he arrived, the first thing he noticed was the garden, well maintained. Flowers on one side, trimmed bushes on the other, a stone path leading to the entrance. The house was beautiful. Good structure, good location. But it had that air of another era. Old furniture, heavy curtains, rugs that looked like they'd been bought in the 70s. The kind of house Derek internally called a grandma house. Nothing that a good renovation couldn't fix. He walked through the living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms, wrote everything down on his phone, took photos of the strong points and the points that needed adjustment. The bathroom needed updating. The kitchen was dated. But the lot was large, and the location made up for everything. When he went out to the backyard, that's when Derek saw it. On the house wall, on the inside, facing the garden, there was a large painting of the Virgin Mary. An old painting, as if it were part of the construction. The colors were a bit faded by time, but the image was clear. The Virgin Mary with open hands, looking forward. Derek stopped, looked at the painting, then looked at the wall around it. Mentally calculated how much it would cost to make that wall presentable for sale. "This needs to be painted over," Derek said, pointing to the wall. "The religious painting is nice, but it's outdated. A can of paint fixes it. Paint over it, leave the wall smooth, and the garden gets a whole new look, increases the property value." Rebecca, the lady's oldest daughter, was beside him. She looked at the painting and then looked at Derek. "The painting stays," Rebecca said. Her voice was calm but firm. "I understand the sentimental value, Rebecca, but from a market perspective," Derek began. "The painting stays," Rebecca repeated. "That painting has already performed miracles." Derek looked at her, gave that polite smile. That smile he used when a client said something he considered irrelevant. "Of course, no problem. The painting stays," Derek said. But inside, his thought was different. Miracles. Sure, an old painting on a garden wall performed miracles. Derek almost rolled his eyes but held back. Professionalism above all. He went back inside the house to finish the notes. Didn't think about the painting again. 2 weeks later, the open house was scheduled. Derek arrived early, organized the entire house, curtains open to let natural light in, opened the bedroom windows to air things out, pushed the furniture half an inch this way, half an inch that way, until everything was symmetrical. Everything following the script he always followed. Derek put the sign in front of the house, "Open House, Welcome," adjusted his tie in the reflection of the glass door, took a deep breath, smiled. The show was about to begin. Visitors started arriving around 10 in the morning, young couples, families, investors. Derek greeted each one with the same smile, the same energy, the same confidence, a firm handshake. A welcome that sounded genuine, even though it was the 10th time he'd said it that morning. Have you ever been to an open house? That thing where you walk through a house that isn't yours, open cabinets, imagine your life inside it? Some people go just out of curiosity. Some people go with the real intention to buy. Derek could tell one from the other in less than 30 seconds. The flow was good. Derek guided the visitors naturally. A lady stopped in the living room and looked at a framed photo that the family hadn't removed yet. It was the former owner of the house, the lady who had passed away, smiling in the garden. "She looks like she was a good person," the visiting lady said. "Absolutely," Derek responded, with that professional tone that said nothing. "A very beloved family in the neighborhood." And he led the lady to the next room. Around noon, a couple went out to the backyard. The man was tall, wearing a polo shirt. They stopped in front of the painting on the wall. "Look at this," the woman said, pointing. "How beautiful." Derek appeared behind them, saw they were looking at the painting. She was quite devout. "But honestly, I'd paint over it," Derek said with a light tone. What Derek didn't see was that Nathan, the lady's grandson, was standing about 15 feet away. He was there to monitor the open house on behalf of the family. He heard everything. Nathan didn't yell, didn't make a scene. He walked up to Derek slowly. "My grandmother talked to her every day there," Nathan said, looking at the painting. "Every day, 40 years. She received many miracles in front of that painting." Nathan's voice wasn't one of anger. It was something worse, a calm sadness. Derek looked at Nathan, gave that polite smile again. "I understand, Nathan. It's a beautiful tradition," Derek said. And he continued conducting the open house as if nothing had happened. At the end of the day, the open house was a success. 3 offers received. Derek was satisfied, called the office, sent the numbers, organized the folders, got in the car, and left. The following days were normal. Derek made other visits, closed other sales, attended to other clients. Life continued at its usual pace, until one Thursday morning Derek woke up feeling strange. It wasn't a strong pain. It was a different tiredness, a heaviness in his body that he didn't recognize. Had coffee, tried to ignore it, went to work. By mid-afternoon, the tiredness got worse. His legs were swollen. His mouth was dry in a way he'd never felt before. You know, when your body tries to tell you something and you pretend you didn't hear? Derek pretended for 2 days. On the 3rd, he couldn't anymore. Called the doctor and scheduled an appointment. The tests were quick. The doctor called Derek back to the office 3 days later. The expression on his face already said enough. Derek sat in the chair and listened. "Derek, your kidneys aren't working properly," the doctor said. "We'll need to start treatment. You'll need hemodialysis sessions." Derek stayed silent. The word echoed in his head as if it had been said in an empty room. "For how long?" Derek asked. "We'll evaluate as the tests come in, but for now, 3 times a week," the doctor responded. Derek left the office, sat in the car, stayed parked in the parking lot for 20 minutes without starting the engine, 3 times a week. The words didn't fit in his head. He was 45 years old, ran 3 times a week, ate reasonably well, didn't smoke. How had this happened? The man who controlled everything, who had an answer for everything, who solved any problem with a phone call and a smile. Now he needed a machine to do what his organs couldn't do anymore. Derek started the car, drove home, sat on the couch, turned on the television, didn't watch anything. kept his gaze fixed on the screen without registering a single image. That night, he tried to research the condition on the internet, read half a page, and close the laptop. For the first time in his life, Derek didn't want information, didn't want data, didn't want to know. He wanted it not to be true. In the days before the first session, Derek tried to keep his routine as if nothing had happened. Went to the office, attended to clients, smiled. But the smile was heavier. The pauses between sentences were longer. His body was giving signals and he was pretending he didn't see them. The secretary asked if he was okay one Tuesday morning. Derek was paler than normal. "I'm great, Karen. Just slept poorly," Derek responded. Karen looked at him with that face of someone who doesn't believe but doesn't insist. The first session was the following week. Derek arrived early, sat in the reclining chair. The nurse explained the procedure. The machine started working. And Derek stayed there, still, looking at the ceiling, 3 hours, 3 times a week. Can you imagine sitting in a chair for 3 hours without being able to do anything, without being able to solve anything? For someone like Derek, that was almost unbearable. He tried to work from his phone during the first sessions, answered emails, sent messages to clients, looked at spreadsheets. But the tiredness was so much that after an hour, he couldn't focus on the screen anymore. So he stayed there, listening to the sound of the machine. You know what's difficult for a person who always had control of everything? Realizing there are things that don't depend on them. At the real estate office, Derek tried to maintain his routine, but the tiredness was constant. His colleagues noticed, clients noticed. He who before had energy to spare now seemed to carry an invisible weight. Derek didn't tell almost anyone about the condition, told his partner because he had to, told the secretary because she organized the schedule. To the rest of the world, Derek was just a little tired. Pride. That kind of pride that doesn't let you admit you need help. The weeks kept passing. The sessions became routine. Derek would go, sit, wait, return home. One night, after a particularly tiring session, Derek fell asleep early, passed out before 9, the kind of heavy sleep of someone who's exhausted. The body shut down before the mind, and he dreamed. In the dream, Derek was in a place he didn't recognize. It was an open space, wide, without walls, without ceiling, but it wasn't dark. There was a light, a soft light that came from all sides at once, without any shadow. And before him, the Virgin Mary. She was there, standing, in silence, looking at him with an expression Derek couldn't define, something he'd never seen on anyone's face. It seemed like she knew him, that she knew everything about him, and even so, she was there. Her hands were open, directed toward him, and from the hands he felt something, didn't see, felt, an energy, a warmth, something that entered through his chest and spread through his entire body. Derek didn't say anything in the dream, couldn't speak. His mouth wouldn't open, but not from fear, because it wasn't necessary. There was nothing to say. He just stayed there, receiving that, without understanding what it was. And then he woke up. It was 4:12 in the morning. The room was dark. Derek stayed lying down, looking at the ceiling. His heart was beating fast. He'd never dreamed of anything like that. Never. Derek was the type of person who dreamed about meetings, about contracts, about numbers. He stayed there for almost an hour, thinking, trying to rationalize, trying to put that into a box that made sense in his head. He couldn't. Got up, drank a glass of water, and went back to bed. Didn't sleep anymore. The next day, Derek didn't tell anyone about the dream. Kept it to himself. Did what he always did. Worked. Attended to clients. Answered emails. Pretended everything was normal. But the dream stayed. You know when something happens, and no matter how much you try to push it to the back of your mind, it insists on coming back? It was like that. The image of the Virgin Mary with open hands appeared at the most random moments, in traffic, at lunchtime, during a call with a client. Derek would shake his head and move forward, always forward. 10 days after the dream, Derek received a call. A client interested in visiting the house with the painting on the wall. On Thursday, Derek arrived at the house an hour before the client. He needed to organize everything, parked the car in front, stayed a few seconds inside before getting out. Derek took a deep breath and got out of the car. The house was the same way. But now, without the movement of the open house, without the visitors, without the noise, the house had a different weight. It was silent. It was a silence that seemed to hold something. Derek walked through the living room, ran his hand over the table without noticing, did everything automatically like he always did. But his head wasn't in the rooms. His head was in the garden. He opened the back door and went out to the garden. The garden was a little different from the open house. Without someone to take care of it, the flowers had grown more than they should. The grass was a little high. Some dry leaves scattered along the stone path, but the wall was there. And on the wall, the painting. Derek looked at it and stopped. This time was different. When he looked at the Virgin Mary, the phrase came, without warning. Nathan's voice, clear as if he were right there beside him. She received many miracles in front of that painting. And along with the phrase came the dream, the Virgin Mary before him, the open hands, the warmth, the energy running through his entire body. Derek stood still in the middle of the garden, alone, looking at the painting. And then he felt it, the smell of roses. Strong, very strong, stronger than any perfume, than any flower he'd ever smelled in his life. Derek looked around. There were no roses in the garden, but the smell was there, coming from somewhere, coming from everywhere at once. And along with the smell, a peace. Have you ever felt a peace that doesn't make sense? A peace that doesn't match the moment you're living? Derek was sick. His body was tired. His professional life was complicated. He had every reason in the world to be anxious, worried, angry. But there, in front of that painting, he felt peace. Derek stayed there, still. And then something happened inside him, something that came from a place so deep he didn't even know it existed. His eyes filled with water. Derek tried to hold back, squeezed his eyes shut, and the tears came. Derek knelt down, right there, on the garden floor. In front of that painting he wanted to cover with white paint, and cried. Didn't cry prettily. Cried for real, his body shaking, his shoulders trembling, his hands on the ground, tears he didn't even know he was holding back, weeks of fear, of pride, of pretending, of loneliness, everything coming out at once. "Forgive me," Derek whispered, looking at the painting. His voice came out hoarse, broken. "Forgive me for everything I said. Forgive me for everything I thought." Have you ever asked forgiveness for something you didn't even know you'd done wrong? Derek stayed on his knees for several minutes, crying, the peace inside him. The entire world seemed to go silent. Just him, the garden, and the painting. And then he did something he'd never done in his entire life, something that went against everything he believed. Against the pride, the independence, and the certainty that he didn't need anyone. He asked for help. "I don't know what to do," Derek said, looking at the image of the Virgin Mary. "I always knew what to do, always had an answer, always had a plan, and now I have nothing. I'm sick, and I can't fix it." Derek stayed there until he heard the sound of a car parking in front of the house. The client had arrived. He got up, cleaned his face, straightened his suit, took a deep breath. When the client entered, Derek was standing in the living room with the same professional smile as always. He showed the entire house. When they went out to the garden, the client looked at the wall. "And this painting?" the client asked. Derek looked at the painting. "The family asked that it stay," Derek said. "Just that." No jokes, no suggestion to paint over it. The client looked at the painting one more moment, then went back inside. That night, Derek slept differently. It wasn't a heavy sleep from exhaustion. It was a calm sleep, peaceful. No dreams this time. But when he woke up the next morning, something was different. The tiredness was less. Not much. It wasn't like he'd woken up brand new, but it was like someone had taken away a bit of the weight he was carrying. Just a bit. Derek noticed, but didn't say anything. Went to work, did the session, went back home. The next day, the tiredness was a little less still, and the day after, a little less. It was subtle. Derek noticed that his legs were less swollen, that the energy was returning, little by little, like water filling a glass drop by drop. He didn't tell anyone, kept that to himself, like he kept the dream and the moment in the garden at the routine appointment. The doctor looked at the tests, compared them with the previous tests. "Derek, your tests have improved significantly," the doctor said. "Is that normal?" Derek asked. The doctor looked at Derek the way doctors look when they don't have a ready answer. "For the stage you were at, this improvement isn't what we usually see. This is rare," the doctor said. Derek left the clinic that day and sat in the car. This time it wasn't desperation. It was something else. Something he didn't know how to name. It wasn't exactly joy. It wasn't exactly relief. He thought about the dream, about the Virgin Mary, about the warmth that ran through his body. He thought about the garden, about the smell of roses that had no explanation, about the peace that arrived without being called. He thought about himself on his knees on the ground, crying like he hadn't cried since he was young, asking forgiveness from an image he wanted to erase. Derek drove home, did something he never did, sat on the couch and stayed in silence. Without television, without phone, without music, just silence. In the following weeks, the improvement continued, slowly, steadily. Each test was better than the previous one. The sessions that were 3 times a week went to once. The months kept passing. Derek returned to working at his normal pace. And Derek changed. It wasn't a transformation that everyone noticed overnight. It was subtle. The colleagues at the real estate office noticed that Derek was different at open houses. Before, everything was a sales pitch. Now, Derek walked through the houses with a different look. He'd stop. Pay attention to the things families had left there. Do you notice when someone starts looking at the world in a different way? At an open house a few months later, a client asked Derek about a small altar that was in a corner of a room in a house. "Does this come with the house?" the client asked. Derek looked at the altar, a small image of the Virgin Mary, candles beside it, a rosary hanging. Before, Derek would have steered the conversation to what mattered, the price, the square footage, the potential. But that's not what he did. That stays with the house. It's the kind of thing that makes a house more than 4 walls, Derek said. The client looked at him surprised. Derek gave a smile, not the sales smile, a different smile. The secretary said once to a colleague that Derek seemed lighter. The partner commented that he was more human with clients. What Derek did, and this he also didn't tell anyone, was that every night before sleeping, he'd stay in silence for a few minutes. Didn't pray the formal way, didn't kneel, didn't speak out loud, just stayed quiet, and smiled. The lady's house was sold 2 months later. The buyer was a couple who was looking for a place with a large garden. They had 2 young boys, 4 and 6 years old. When they saw the painting on the wall, the woman stopped, stayed looking for a long time. Rebecca, the daughter, cried when she learned that the new owners wanted to keep the painting, said her mother would be happy, that it was like the house had found the right people. Nathan sent a message to Derek thanking him. The message was simple. "Thank you for finding someone who values what my grandmother loved most about this house." Derek read Nathan's message and stayed looking at the phone screen for a good while, sitting in the car, still. He thought about that open house day, about the comment about the can of paint, about the polite smile he gave when Nathan talked about miracles, about the disdain he felt inside, and he thought about who he was now. You know what's strange? Derek couldn't explain what had happened. If someone asked, he wouldn't know how to put it into words. He didn't become devout. What changed was something inside. Derek learned that there are things bigger than him, and that admitting that isn't weakness, it's the opposite. He remembered the painting on the wall every day. Remembered because that image, the Virgin Mary with open hands on a garden wall, had become the most real thing he'd ever seen in his life. The man who wanted to cover the painting with white paint, who thought miracles were a waste of time, who never needed faith for anything. That same man on his knees in a garden, with his suit dirty, asking forgiveness from an image he wanted to erase, and receiving something he didn't even know existed. Something he never would have found if he hadn't stopped fighting and simply knelt down. Coincidence? Maybe. But what about the dream, and the smell of roses in a garden where there were no roses, the peace that made no sense at all, and the fact that the improvement started exactly after that moment on his knees on the ground with his hands on the grass, in front of a painting on a garden wall? Each person will draw their own conclusion. Derek drew his. And lives with it every day, in silence, with gratitude, a painting on a wall. And a man who learned that the greatest miracle isn't what happens in the body, it's what happens when you stop thinking you know everything and accept that there are things you don't understand. Before we finish, I want to invite you to be part of our prayer community, a space where people from various parts of the world unite to pray and share testimonies of the blessings received. If you feel in your heart the desire to walk together in this prayer community, click below, become a channel member, and pray with us. And look, if you made it here, to the end of Derek's story, do something for me. Write in the comments the painting, which means much more than paint on a wall. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached, and every time I read the painting in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that miracles still happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. Write in the comments about some miracle you've witnessed or experienced, and share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.